Oh, what a great evening so far, and I hope just to make it better. It has been an amazing time. Thank you to all of you for being so hospitable to our family and to speaking to us, and a lot of you taking care of our boys. If you have not been here in the past evenings, we are the Glendennings. I'm Chuzzy, and my husband Martin, who is there probably at the end helping with the PowerPoint. We are missionaries, and we at the moment serve in Central Europe. If you're not familiar with the Church of the Nazarene, it's divided in 6 world areas, and each of these areas is divided in smaller areas that we call field. The larger areas, we call them regions, and we are part of the Eurasia region that goes from the Azores, Russia, South Asia, and everything that is in between. And at the moment, we work at the Central Europe field, which goes from Denmark down to Albania, and it includes all those countries in the middle. So we serve in this area, plus we are also assigned to Croatia, and that's where we work in theological education for me, and in district development, ministerial development, and for Martin, Nazarene Compassionate Ministries and finances, both in Croatia and in the field. And this, you probably have met also our 2 boys. If you have not met them, you have heard them, or maybe you have found them in your little tents or homes, probably just opening your fridge and taking food. Our little one has no boundaries, and not for lack of trying. Trust me, he just feels home here. So thank you guys for doing that. But tonight we want to share a little bit about our work in Croatia. Martin talked a little bit about the field just a few days ago, and talked about our work that we are doing about Ukraine. And this is a little bit the history of Central Europe. Central Europe historically has been a troubled place. We are a place where either we have had war in this area of the world, or if there is war in other areas of the world, we will get a lot of people who will escape from this war coming as transit through Central Europe. We had the Yugoslavian war, we have the war between Serbia and Kosovo, then we had the war in the Middle East, and we had over 1 million people coming through Central Europe, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And now with the war in Ukraine, with the crisis in Afghanistan, we got a lot of refugees from Afghanistan. With the crisis in Iran, a lot of Christians who have to leave their country because of persecution will come through Croatia, and few will stay in Croatia. But the work of the Church of the Nazarene in Croatia started in 2005. We sent missionaries there. We started our goal is always to do work, to start churches with people from that country. While the Lord does call us to certain nations, most of all, He calls us to people. And in 2015, we found over 1 million people from Syria leaving a war zone to come to Europe. And as a church, it wasn't a question for us, are we going to answer to it? It was more, how are we going to answer to it? And because we have a history with refugees, and we have a history of responding to such a crisis, we position ourselves in all these countries. You will always find a Nazarene Compassionate Ministry tent when there is a crisis, at least in Central Europe. And in each of those borders, we position ourselves with our little tent, and we of course, we do humanitarian work, but we do more than just humanitarian work. We do a work that is so important in the world today, and that work is called presence. Just being present in the lives of people who are escaping terrible situations. And the beautiful with presence, especially foreign presence, is that when we are there, authorities tend to behave. So it's very important that we are present there for that too. But that allows us also to have to talk to people and to listen to their stories and to earn their trust and to know that we genuinely love them, and that allows us then to share Christ with them. And sometimes it does come in form of humanitarian work, and sometimes it comes into a conversation about Jesus Himself. And that's how the work started. We have one of those tents in Croatia. As the humanitarian crisis was, as the refugees were coming, it was creating a humanitarian crisis. So each countries that closed all the borders, and all the refugees that were at the moment within those borders then stayed within those borders. This started the refugee camps, and at the Church of the Nazarene, again, the question was not if, the question was how. And we entered inside the refugee camps, and we started ministering to people to only realize, because sometimes we go into situation and new places thinking that we're going to bring Jesus there, to only realize that Jesus has already been there. And that's what we see as we met more and more people. We heard stories of people who Jesus has been revealing himself in this journey through dreams, through conversation, through scriptures. Because while it was a journey for a lot of them leaving Syria to a safe place, it became a spiritual journey too. They say that it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a global church to bring a person to reconciliation with Christ. Because we saw the faithfulness of the Christians in Greece who have given Bibles to refugees. Then those refugees has come to Bosnia, and there they have met Christians, and they had questions about what they have read. And then they come to Croatia, and in Croatia they say, I'm ready. I want to be part of this family. And we disciple them, we baptize them. We are a transit country. Refugees do not stay in Croatia, being considered not having many opportunities. They tend to go to more richer countries, which are Western European or North America. And we send them out, and we follow up with them. As they go to a new country, we have connection and a network of Nazarene and non-Nazarene churches. So when they go to that country, we say, okay, we are going to help you to find a community, because it's important. We do work online, which is great, but you need to be part of the community. And so we have been able to follow a lot of them. And here is the beauty. And I'm surprised by the work of God. Because I hear a lot of people say, aren't you afraid of all these Muslims comes into Europe? And I say, no, absolutely not. That would make the gospel such a weak and delicate. And I know the gospel anything but delicate or weak. And here is what is happening. These same refugees who end up in a German church now, they are the evangelists of those churches. They are bringing German people to German churches, Italian people to Italian churches, Spanish people to Spanish churches. They are sharing this salvation, this deep experience with Christ. They're sharing with other people who desperately need it. Every time when I meet a new person, I have this question in mind. And it's a question that comes from Genesis 3. It's verse 8 and 9. This has always, since I became a Christian, and I'll share a little bit about my story too, but there was this scripture in Genesis where Adam and Eve had sinned, and they are in hiding now. And God comes to the garden, and he asks this question to them. Where are you? Where are you? And when I meet new people, that's the question I also ask. Where is this person? Where is this person hiding? Because God has come to find them and to get them out of the bushes and to change them and transform them and send them out. And I want you to meet some of those people tonight. I want you to meet a girl from Syria. Her name is Katya. Katya came from a war zone. She's 24 years old. She was very young when the war started. They decided to stay in Damascus for 5 of those years, coming almost daily into death situations. But the family decided to leave Syria when a bomb fell in their living room. But it didn't explode. So the family was able to leave the home, and 5 minutes in the car, another bomb hit the home and destroyed it. Katya's family lived in terror for 5 years. There are 4 girls. And as ISIS was coming closer to Damascus, the terror was increasing for her parents. She said that her father would sleep with a gun under his pillow because if ISIS came into the house, he would kill the girls first. Because the girls in the hand of ISIS, that death would be much, much worse, since a lot of them are used for sex trafficking, human trafficking, or organ trafficking. And so they left Syria, desperate. The father decided to stay with the older sister in Lebanon. She was about to get married, and then he would join the rest of the family later, who left to come to Europe, going through Turkey, Greece, the rest of Europe, and at the end in Vienna. They had one of the most terrible experiences that most of the refugees that came during this time had, the passage between Turkey and Greece, which is a boat passage. Thousands and thousands of people died here. Because smugglers usually will use boats that are for 20 people, they will use them for 45 people. And a lot of these boats have sank there. And that is one of the most traumatic events that Katja remembers during that journey. Once they arrived in Vienna, she had a deep episode of depression. She didn't want to leave the room for up to 6 months. Finally, she was able to get out and start learning the language and started getting to know the people and coming out of the depression. When just a few months later, the police showed up at her door and said, "You have 5 minutes to grab what you need. You will be deported to Croatia." They were put in prison and then in a refugee camp. Another episode of depression, this time worse than the first. They spent 2 years in the refugee camp, and that's where we met Katja and her family. Now, Katja comes from a Christian family. She comes from a Greek Orthodox family. That's why the Christian family, were the first to leave war zones with the ISIS attacks. But she never had a very deep relationship with Christ. We invited Katja to come to church with us. She joined the community and she started being part of the community. Her mom started also being part of the community. The family started evangelizing in the refugee camp with us, holding Bible studies. And one of our biggest growth with the Muslim community was during that time. Then the family left the refugee camp. They got asylum. And what happens usually when people get asylum is that the adrenaline goes down because they feel safe now, and all mental health issues start coming out. PTSD being one of the most common one for us. Katja went into another deep, deep depression to the point that we had to remove her from her family, and Martin and I decided that she would be better if she lived with us for some time. And so she's been living now for 2 years with us, and once we go back, she will move out, and she's doing well. But during this time, as we are journeying with her and her mental health and her situation, it was also a spiritual journey for her. I remember the first month she came to our home, she was reading scriptures, and she said, "Pastor Chezi, there is something about John 1 that every time I read, it gives me goosebumps." And this was for me as a pastor. I said, this is God asking her, "Where are you, Katja?" But I decided not to tell her anything. I said, "Listen, Katja, I can give you a good exegesis of that passage, but I can't tell you what God is telling you." Now, as a pastor, when we see gift and graces, we do tell people, we want to point that out to them. But in this case, we decided not, because she was living with us and because she loved us and respected us, I didn't want her to think that this was our desire for her. So I told God, "Listen, God, this has to be a conversation between you and her. You have to tell that." Because sometimes, as many pastors know, in our journey as ministers, the only time sometimes that what keeps us to do what we do is our call. And I wanted for her that if that day ever came, I didn't want her to think, "Oh, maybe Pastor Chezi got it wrong." I wanted her, again, if that day comes, that she has that conversation with God. And so She kept wrestling and wrestling with these scriptures throughout the year till just a few weeks before coming here. We were having a Bible study. Because we don't have a space, we meet in coffee shop for our Bible study. She took my Bible as I'm sharing a devotion with the people that are there, and she got so excited. And I saw her, and when we went home, we had a conversation. She said, Pastor Chezi, I know what God is calling me to do. God is calling me to ministry. And I was telling him no, because I really don't like what you do. And I said, that's okay. Some days I don't either, so you're okay here. But she said, God is telling me that after that scripture, where it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then after that, the story of John the Baptist starts. She said, God is asking me to leave everything to serve other people. God found her in her desperation, took her out of those bushes where she was hiding to bring her now to flourish, to healing her, and then to calling her and to sending her. Another person I want you to meet before we go to that picture, if we are broadcasting or if we will post this later, this part needs to be cut for safety reasons. So this cannot be on social media. Thank you. Yeah, I have one more story. Are you with me still? All right, okay. It's not a coincidence that I ended up in Croatia. We work with mostly Muslim people, and my background is Muslim too. I grew up in a little home in Albania, small village. My parents were politicians during communism, but they were not the type of politicians that the government liked. My father ended up 12 years in prison, one of the harshest prisons in Albania, because he was involved in trying to overthrow the government. We were born in an internment camp in northern Albania, me and my 4 sisters. And since I was a little girl, I wanted to know more about God. I had always been this curiosity about God. My parents could not speak to us about God. We were spied all the time. There was always an opportunity. The government was always trying to find a way to punish my parents. And if you know anything about communism, the governments own everything. You don't just go shop. The government gives you what you need. And a lot of time, they punished by withholding food from us. And so my parents were very careful what they spoke to us. But my grandma was old. She didn't care. So she would use God to scare me most of the time. And I became so curious. I remember I would write these letters to God and put them in the balcony, hoping that one day he will take them from me. One night there was a storm and my letter was not there. I don't know who took it, but in my brain it was God, and that was enough for me. But when communism fell in 1990, the country became a free democratic country, and a lot of the religious groups came to Albania. Our area where I was born and raised was historically Muslim, and so the Muslim leaders came and claimed their properties, which the government has taken from them before communism. So I thought this was my opportunity to follow God and to know more about God. So I devoted myself to Islam. I learned the prayers in Arabic, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, and I became so devoted to know this God. And don't take me wrong, but I did love God with all my heart. My parents, when I decided to cover myself and put the hijab, my parents were not happy. My mom is from an Orthodox background, my father is Muslim, but they wanted us to be free but not covered. But I told my parents that was the journey I was going to follow, and they allowed me because they fought so hard so I could make decisions on my own. They decided to send me to Saudi Arabia because I was really good at the mosque. So I would study there for 5 years and then come back and teach Islam to women. Just a few months before this would happen, my father had a car accident as He was an advisor to the president at that time. He was coming from the capital and got in a car crash where he died. And that was a big hit for our family. I just could not make theological sense of what has happened to him. And I started asking questions to the Muslim leaders, and they told me, you don't question the will of God. But anybody who knows me, I question. And I just couldn't reconcile that somehow this God who loved us and who I loved was writing the future. That in the Muslim religion, they will tell you that God has written your future. And I just couldn't understand how all the evil that was happening around us was somehow part of God's written destiny to us. Now, don't take me wrong, they're great Muslim theologians. Half of my family is Muslim, so I hope you don't misunderstand what I'm trying to say here. But it was hard, so I decided to leave Islam. I decided that was not going to be my future. I believed in God, I just didn't want to have anything to do with him. I did not think he was just enough for me. I moved to another city with our family. Usually, when the father dies, the brothers or your father's family will take you. But in order for them to happen, they own you practically. And my mom said, no, we did not spend 12 years in prison, so you can marry them at 16. And so she decided to leave all their supports. And it's hard for a single mom in a male-dominant culture to raise 5 girls. But she's a courageous mom. And she took us into a new city where I met other Christians. Now, I was trained how to debate with a Christian and tell what's wrong with them. So I started to debate with these 2 girls that were in my class. Poor things, they had just become Christians in a year themselves. But they loved me, and they accepted me, although I was not a pleasant person to be around. I decided to go to church with them because they have kept inviting me, and I said, I'll go and show them how wrong they are in their faith. So I went, and I actually had an incredible time at that community. And I decided when I came home, and I said, Mom, I think I want to go back to that church. And my mom said, never. You're not going to that church. You are a Muslim. Now, my family had been disappointed that I turned down the opportunity to go to Saudi Arabia. For my mom, who had to raise now 5 girls and find herself poor, 1 less girl to educate and to feed was a help. And so the rest of the family had practically abandoned us, so we had to figure this out on my own. So I said, you know what, Mom, I don't have to go. But here's the thing with God. When we give up on God, he does not give up on us. Just because when we are in our bushes, he comes and calls us and we keep hiding, he keeps calling. And he keeps finding another way into our life. And that other way came in a form of a pastor who actually came from Canada. He was a businessman who had left, sold everything to come and serve in Albania after communism fell. He was teaching English in our school. And one day he invited my 2 friends and I and said, listen, I would like to start a church in this city. Would you help me? And I said, of course not. I'm not a Christian, so I can't help you. And he said, okay, can you bring some brochures around? And I said, I can do that. That doesn't make a Christian. And so here I am planting a church before I'm a Christian. So never put boundaries to God. And so I'm giving all these brochures everywhere to everyone, and I come home. Now, since the moment that the tragedy in my family happened, that my father passed away, to this moment, I had not accepted really his death. I did not grieve. I did not go to his funeral. I did not cry. I just became a violent child in school, a big problem for my mom. But this night, as I came home and I had only 1 brochure left, I found myself in a dark room. Albania was in a bad shape at that moment. We were in total anarchy. I found this brochure, It was dark in the room. My mom had put some candles around, and it hit me, everything that has happened to our family. To my father's death, to moving to what had been home for me so many years, to the city, from a farm to the city, to a new school, and to a family that was all the time a danger for human trafficking. My mom also slept with a gun under her pillow in case somebody, because families only with girls were target for human trafficking. So gangs can come into your home and just take your girls. And that happened constantly. And it just felt so hopeless for me and for my family. And I just felt so heavy and so dark at that moment. Till I got this brochure that I've given to everyone, but I have not read, of course. And they had the invitation in one side about the first service, and then on the other side was a little story of Jesus and a prayer that changed my life. It was a short prayer, and it said, if you would like God to be your father, and that's what got me. Because here I was, realizing that I've lost a father that was like God to me. And here was God offering himself as my father. And I went on my knees, and I said, can we start again? I did that prayer many times because, I was a difficult child, so I wanted to make sure he got my prayer of salvation. But I know that moment, I came out of the bushes, out of the darkness, and then through time, he changed me, he transformed me, and he called me. And I became part of planting that church and planting other churches in the future, to standing here today and preaching in a country that I never thought I would even step in. A God who calls out of the bushes people who are hiding, a God who changes, transforms, and then sends us out. Now, I know many of you might think, oh, these are great stories from Croatia or your side of the world. I've traveled over 30 countries and lived in 5 of them. And brokenness looks the same, that you come from a poor country or a rich country. There is plenty of Miriams here in Canada. There is plenty of Katyas here in Canada. There is plenty of Chezis here in Canada. And some of them are in our churches. And God is calling all of us out of those bushes and asking us that question over and over, where are you? And this is not a question only for non-Christians. Remember, Adam and Eve have the most beautiful relationship with God, one that we all aim for. This is a question for all of us. Where are you? Is the question of God to us. Where are we hiding, if we are hiding? If it's our fears, our depression, our hopelessness, our fear to step forward, or maybe we're hiding up behind our comfort, our nice homes, our beautiful lives. God is calling the church today. Where are you? We were at the meeting with the pastors last night, and the question was asked, where do you find hope today? And he said, I find hope in the fact that we're desperate. And in our desperation, God comes with the same question, where are you? And he will get us out of those situations. I see that every day. Trust me, please. You don't have to believe it, you have to trust it. And then he heals and he sends us out. Because there is a broken world that needs people who can show unconditional love to broken people. And the beauty is, when we meet somebody else's brokenness, ours heals too. I've learned more from refugees that I've learned in any of my theological studies, and trust me, I've had 8 of them. 8 years. And it is in these encounters that we will be transformed. Are we ready to come out of where we are? Tonight, I'll ask Myrna to come over here. She'll play some music. But I want all of us tonight to wrestle a bit with this question: to where are you? And maybe you don't even know what that looks like. But you know what? We can do something symbolic that we do a lot in the church. It's coming out of it. And tonight might look coming out of your seats and coming here forward and say, God, here I am. Heal me, transform me, change me, and send me. And I believe in a God who does this constantly, because if he can do it with Miriam, trust me, and he can do it with me, he can do it with any of us. So I want to invite us, come forward tonight here at the altar and just tell God, I'm here. And he will change and transform you. And if there are other people, if the people come forward, please, if you feel like coming and praying for some of them, come over here. If you're a pastor or a minister or a person of prayer, come and pray for the people. And I'll pray for all of us, and then we will sing a sending song that I hope it becomes a prayer and a reality for all of us.